Hi guys, welcome back to my read long channel. Sorry if the audio sounds a bit different or you pick up a few sounds in the background. I'm not home, but I remember to take my laptop to do a read long for you guys. So let's see how this goes. Starting off a new book today. This is Roald Dahl's, another one. Danny the Champion of the World. So without further ado, let's get reading. I'm just reading for entertainment and pleasure. Of course, this is all Roald Dahl's own work. Let's get going. So, Danny, the Champion of the World by Roald Dahl. Chapter 1, The Filling Station. When I was about 4 months old, my mother died suddenly and my father was left to look after me all by myself. This is how I looked at the time, and then there's a little picture of a baby. I had no brothers or sisters, so all through my boyhood, from the age of 4 months onwards, there were just two of us, my father and me. We lived in an old gypsy caravan behind a filling station. My father owned the filling station and the caravan and a small field behind. That was about all he owned in the world. It was a very small filling station on the small country road, surrounded by fields and woody hills. While I was still a baby, my father washed me and fed me and changed my nappies and did all the millions of other things a mother normally does for her child. This is not an easy task for a man, especially when he has to earn his living at the same time by repairing motor car engines and serving customers with petrol. But my father didn't seem to mind. I think all the love he had felt for my mother when she was alive, he now lavished upon me. During my early years, I never had a moment's unhappiness or illness, and here I am on my 5th birthday. There's a picture of him too. I was now a scruffy little boy, as you can see, with grease and oil all over me. But that was because I spent all day in the workshop helping my father with the cars. The filling station itself had only two pumps. There was a wooden shed behind the pumps that served as an office. There was nothing in the office except an old table and a cash register to put the money into. It was one of those where you pressed a button and a bell rang and the drawer shot out with a terrific bang. I used to love that. The square brick building to the right of the office was the workshop. My father built that himself with loving care, and it was the only really solid thing in the place. "We are engineers, you and I," he used to say to me. "We earn our living by repairing engines, and we can't do good work in a rotten workshop." It was a fine workshop, big enough to take one car comfortably and leave plenty of room around the sides for working. It had a telephone so that customers could arrange to bring their cars in for repair. The caravan was our house and our home. It was a real old gypsy wagon with big wheels and fine patterns painted all over it in yellow and blue and red and blue. Excuse me, guys, sorry. My father said it was at least 150 years old. Many gypsy children, he said, had been born in it and had grown up within its wooden walls. With a horse to pull it, the old caravan must have wandered for thousands of miles along the roads and lanes of England. But now its wanderings were over, and because the wooden spokes in the wheels were beginning to rot, my father had propped it up underneath with bricks. There was only one room in the caravan, and wasn't much bigger than a fair-sized modern bathroom. It was a narrow room, the shape of a caravan itself, and the back of the wall were two bunk beds, one above another. The top one was my father's, the bottom one was mine. Although we had electric lights in the workshop, we were not allowed to have them in the caravan. The electricity people said it was unsafe to put wires into something as old and rickety as that, so we got our heat and light in much the same way as gypsies had done years ago. There was a wood-burning stove with a chimney that went up through the roof, and this kept us warm in the winter. There was a paraffin burner on which to boil the kettle, or cook a stew, and there was a paraffin lamp hanging from the ceiling. When I needed a bath, my father would heat a kettle of water and pour it into the basin. Then he would strip me naked and scrub me all over standing up. This, I think, just got me just as clean as if I washed in a bath. Probably cleaner because I didn't finish up sitting in my own dirty water. For furniture, we had two chairs and a small table, and those, apart from a tiny chest of drawers, were all the home comforts we possessed. They were all we needed. The lavatory was a funny little wooden hut standing in a field some way beyond the caravan. It was fine in summertime, but I can tell you that sitting out there on a snowy day in winter was like sitting in a fridge. Immediately behind the caravan was an old apple tree. It bore lovely apples that ripened in the middle of September, and you could go on picking them for the next 4 or 5 weeks. Some of the boughs of tree hung right over the caravan, and when the wind down blew the apples down in the night, they often landed at our roof. I would hear them going thump, thump, thump above my head as I lay in my bunk. But those noises never frightened me because I knew exactly what was making them. I really loved living in that gypsy caravan. I loved it especially in the evenings when I was tucked up in my bunk and my father was telling me stories. The paraffin lamp was turned low, and I could see the lumps of wood glowing red hot in the old stove, and wonderful it was to be lying there snug and warm in my bunk in that little room. Most wonderful of all was the feeling that when I went to sleep, my father would still be there, very close to me, sitting in his chair by the fire, or lying in the bunk above my own. Chapter 2, The Big Friendly Giant. Oh, a little bit of a crossover there, guys. My father, without the slightest doubt, was the most marvellous and exciting father any boy had had. Here is a picture of him, and it's like a guy with big fluffy hair and tall, muscular kind of looking. You might think if you didn't know him well that he was stern and serious man. He wasn't. He was actually a wildly funny person. What made him appear so serious was the fact that he never smiled with his mouth. He did it all with his eyes. He had brilliant blue eyes, and when he thought of something funny, his eyes would flash, and if you looked carefully, you could actually see a tiny little golden spark dancing in the middle of each eye. But the mouth never moved. I was glad my father was an eye smiler. It meant he never gave me fake smile because it's impossible to make your eyes twinkle if you aren't feeling twinkly yourself. A mouth smile is different. You can fake a mouth smile anytime you want, simply by moving your lips. I've also learned that a real mouth smile always has a nice smile to go with it. So watch out, I say, when someone smiles at you with his mouth, but the eyes stay the same. It's sure to be bogus. My father was not what you would call an educated man, and I doubt if he really read 20 books in his life. But he was a marvellous storyteller. He used to make up bedtime stories for me every single night, and the best ones were turned into serials, and went on for many nights running. One of them, which must have gone on for at least 50 nights, was about the enormous fellow called the Big Friendly Giant, or the BFG for short. Roald Dahl mentioned in his own books in his books. The BFG was 3 times as tall as the ordinary man, and his hands were as big as wheelbarrows. He lived in a vast underground cavern not far from our filling station, and he only came out the window when it was dark. Inside the cavern he had a powerful factory where he made more than 100 different kinds of magic powder. Occasionally, as he told us stories, my father would stride up and down, waving his arms and waggling his fingers, but mostly he would sit close to me on the edge of my bunk and speak very softly. The big friendly giant makes his magic powders out of dreams that children dream when they are asleep, he said. How? I asked. Tell me how, Dad. Dreams, my love, are very mysterious things. They float around in the night air like little clouds searching for sleeping people. Can you see them? I asked. Nobody can see them. That's how the big friendly giant catch them. Then how does the big friendly giant catch them? Ah, my father said, that is the interesting part. A dream, you see, as it goes drifting through the night air, makes a tiny little buzzing humming sound, a sound so soft and low it's impossible for ordinary people to hear it. But the BFG can hear it easily. His sense of hearing is absolutely fantastic. I loved the far intent look on my father's face when he was telling the story. His face was pale and still and distant, unconscious of everything around him. The BFG, he said, can hear the tread of a ladybird's footsteps as she walks across the leaf. He can hear the whisperings of ants as they scurry around in the soil, talking to one another. He can hear the sudden shrill cry of a pain a tree gives when a woodman cuts into it with an axe. Ah, yes, my darling, there is a whole world of sound around us that we cannot hear because our ears simply are not sensitive enough. What happens when he catches the dreams? I asked. He imprisons them in the glass bottles and screws the tops down tight, my father said. He has thousands of these bottles in his cave. Does he catch bad dreams as well as good ones? Yes, my father said, he catches both, but he only uses the good ones in his powders. What does he do with the bad ones? He explodes them. It's impossible to tell you how much I loved my father. When he was sitting close to me on my bunk, I would reach out and slide my hands into his, and then he would fold his long fingers around my fist, holding tight. What does the BFG do with his powders after he's made them? I asked. In the dead of night, my father said, he goes prowling through the villages searching for houses where children are asleep. Because of this great height, he can reach windows that are 1 and even 2 flights up. And when he finds a room with a sleeping child, he opens a suitcase. His suitcase? I said. The BFG always carries a suitcase and a blowpipe, my father said. The blowpipe is as long as a lamppost. The suitcase is full of powders. So he opens the suitcase and selects exactly the right powder. And he puts it into the blowpipe. And he slides the blowpipe in through the open window. And poof! He blows in the powder. And the powder floats around the room. And that child breathes it in. And then what? I asked. And then, Danny, the child begins to dream marvellous and fantastic dream. And when the dream reaches its most marvellous and fantastic moment, then the magic powder really takes over, and suddenly the dream is not a dream any longer, but a real happening. And the child is not asleep in bed. He is fully awake and is actually in the place of the dream, is taking part in the whole thing. I mean, really taking part in real life. More about that tomorrow. It's getting late. Good night, Danny. Go to sleep. My father kissed me, and then he turned down the wick of a little paraffin lamp and until the flame went out. He seated himself in front of the wood stove, which now made a lovely red glow in the dark room. Dad, I whispered, what is it? Have you ever actually seen the big friendly giant? Once, my father said. Only once. You did? Where? I was out behind the caravan, my father said, and it was clear moonlit night, and I happened to look up, and suddenly I saw this tremendous tall person running along the crest of a hill. He had a queer, long, striding, lolloping gait, and his black cloak was streaming out behind him like the wings of a bird. There was a big suitcase in one hand and a blowpipe in the other, and when he came to the high hawthorn hedge at the end of the field, he just as it strode over it as though it wasn't there. Were you frightened, Dad? No, my father said. It was thrilling to see him, and a little eerie, but I wasn't frightened. Go to sleep now. Good night. Okay, guys, thank you. That was just a little opening video. I'm going to stop there. Chapter 3 is the next chapter. It's a little bit longer as well, so I thought it'd be a good place to leave it there before I run out of time today. We're on page 15 if you're reading along with me with the version I've got. Thank you again for listening. It's great to start a new book. Really have gone through the books this year on these read-alongs, and I really appreciate the growing interest in these videos that I'm getting. So again, thank you for your support, thank you for listening, and I will read to you again soon. Bye guys!